Patient, a male who is in his 20s, is diabetic and was admitted to the medical ward of the Cornwall Regional Hospital from Saturday. It's understood that relatives turned up at the hospital on Sunday and Monday demanding that the patient be released because they were not convinced the doctors had made the correct diagnosis and wanted to take the patient to get alternative help. Clinical coordinator for the Western Regional Health Authority, Dr. Delroy Frey, explained that they were then advised by the medical team that it was not wise to release him based on the severity of his illness.
At that meeting, the family members seem to have accepted that. However, they returned today with other people and they demanded that the patient be released from hospital.
Dr. Frey says the incident has caused panic among the medical staff and that it is already having an effect on doctors who were scheduled for the evening shift.
I think we'll have a small amount of doctors turning up because some calling that they don't feel well. So we have to look alternative way to deal with that.
He says the public should be more sensitive when dealing with medical staff.
We are trying our best to treat patients, and I'm just begging people to be just courteous to the staff. You know, it's hard work, and it would be nice, you know, if we talk, you know, like very civil people and not to shout at them.
President of the Nurses Association of Jamaica, Patsy Edwards Henry, says their behavior caused the medical staff to become fearful.
One of my nurses called me in tears, explaining how frightened she was when persons barged into the accident and emergency area demanding the release of a patient. Based on the information coming out from my nurses, the threats were that they would be killed if the police were called. And yes, the nurses do believe they weren't brandishing weapons, but the nurses do believe that they have weapons.
The police in a statement dismissed reports that the patient is a Don.
There was no confrontation between police and any gunman at that location, and there was, for that matter, no confrontation between police and the family members. The gentleman is a former taxi operator and from all indication was never part of any gang and has never been involved in any confrontation with the police.
I'm a medical officer of Cornwall Regional Hospital. The incident which was reported to me this morning, as I was not present at the time, is that in the Accident and Emergency Department of the Cornwall Regional Hospital, the Trauma 1 area, some friends of a patient came to have him collected and taken out of hospital. The patient was being treated for a medical condition which was deemed to be quite ill, and the medical staff would like to have him continued on treatment. His friends came to the accident emergency department, I understand, and they had some discussion with the clinical staff who were there, asking that the patient be removed. I understand that the clinical staff who were there at the time did advise that the best way to deal with the patient is to have him stay for further treatment, but should the patient be removed, that the process would involve him being signed out. I am further told that, having spoken to the staff about it, the decision was that the friends would have him removed. I understand the relative was present at the time, and the person would have followed the government protocol, which is to sign himself out, and they removed him from the accident and emergency department. Now, the person was here for over 24 hours, and the time when it would have happened would be after 10 o'clock, shortly after 10, because I was in a meeting at the time when this matter was occurring, and I was given a phone call that there were some issues happening in the accident emergency department, where there was an area of concern that the person was to be signed out. We had some some discussion about the process, and it was deemed best that the person follow the guidelines of signing the form and his friends collecting him. In terms of gun, I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of any implements of violence, whether it be knife or gun was available. Word on the street is that they said gunmen were there. But in speaking to the staff who were there, there's no report of anybody pulling a weapon on anyone there. The protocol which would have been followed would be that the local security was present. They would have called upon the Jamaican Constabulary Force to assist them in that matter. I understand the police were also present, but the incident was de-escalated when the patient was removed, and it seemed amicable on all parts. These incidents are rare, but I'd like to recall something which happened to me as an intern. I worked in Spanish Town many years ago, and a gunman came a patient who was shot came into the hospital. And at the time, all staff were fearful, including us as young doctors. The issue was that this person was deemed to be a threat to society, and he was to be operated on. The police force at the time had some major concerns, because here was the issue. They were dealing with a person who was known to be one who worked against society in terms of violence, being namely a gunman, who they claimed had a history. But as a medical person, we weren't aware of that. So what we have to do is treat. The situation was the person actually went to the ward, and some days later, a similar situation occurred. His friends came and collected him. Now, how often do these things happen? Not very often, but one must bear in mind that as the culture in Jamaica changes, where you see more and more more and more violence occurring, these things will likely happen not only outside of the hospital, but they will also happen within the hospital. So, whilst it's not a very common situation where persons will come against this child, I think the factor which made the difference this morning, that the number of persons who came to collect their friend was overwhelming. Persons do come from time to time and discharge their relatives against medical advice, but it's not that common. And the best way to deal with that is to have a conversation with the family and the patient himself to see how best you can deal with this situation. A clinician, one will definitely approach the administrative staff to see if you can improve the security within the accident and emergency department. But as most persons who are from the West would be aware, that we are working in a situation on a campus where there is a lot of construction going on. And ever since the beginning of that construction, we have had the discussion about persons coming on, for example, construction workers, persons delivering things. So discussion has gone on. So started with communication. Communication has started with all members of staff, including medical students and all categories of staff, that you need to be aware that the situation is such that there will be persons who are going to come in the compound who don't necessarily work here. In addition to that, we do have an increase in the number of security cameras, and this is not so because of any violent incident, but this is just to record what is going on while the construction is going on. And in addition to our own local security, we do have increase in terms of having private security companies who have come to assist with the security on the compound. And the last thing I would like to say, that we have been holding meetings with the Jamaican Constabulary Force, and therefore we will have a liaison officer assigned to Cornwall Regional Hospital. So when incidents like these occur, we can discuss it not only with the liaison officer, but also with the High Command of the Jamaican Constabulary Force for Western Jamaica.
Thank you, Dr. I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.